Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, in today's episode, we are going to take a look at the new expansions for the ever expanding, ever growing, the weird and wonderful and bizarre and grotesque science fantasy world of Robert Lemon's Dark Venture. So, a long time ago on the channel, maybe in the first 1 or 2 years of the Dungeon Dive, we took a look at a prototype for Dark Venture. And it was a game that a lot of us immediately fell in love with because of how bizarre and unique the game world is and the gameplay, flaws and all. It's not a perfect game, but over the years, I think its designer, Robert Lemon, has worked to make it a better game. And the new second edition rulebook that we'll take a look at is much better. The game is more focused, and it's such a unique game. There really isn't another game that gives me the same feeling that Dark Venture does. But Dark Venture is kind of an adventure game. It's an overland crawl, a little bit of a dungeon crawl, where you are taking a hero trying to accomplish quests and side quests, get loot, fight monsters, and meet NPCs, and have different encounters in different weird and wild and wonderful locations. And then with Dark Venture, the world of Dark Venture was kind of explored and expanded and changed, approached and from a different angle with Battle of the Ancients. And this is a game that we've also taken a detailed look at. And this is more of a tactical strategy game, a skirmish game, a narrative skirmish game. And so this game kind of zooms in. Think of Dark Venture as kind of like Runebound, where that is your hex crawl. That's your big kind of epic game. And then when you zoom into one hex, you might go into a game of a Battle of the Ancients. And Battle of the Ancients is a narrative skirmish game with all of these different factions that are competing against each other for resources and competing in battle, competing for territory, and expanding the world and the story of this game, because I think that's one of the coolest things about Dark Venture, about this world, the world of Dark Grange here, where the world feels cohesive. And with each new piece, Robert adds a new element to the game, a new way for the players to immerse themselves in this world. And I can, without hesitation, say the same thing for all of the new expansions that we'll take a look at in great detail in the rest of this episode. And now with Dark Venture, we have even more options. We have even more ways to play. So all the new stuff from the last Kickstarter, we have the second edition upgrade kit. We'll take a look at that. We have two small expansions, the Alder King and Beasts and Monsters. And then we have two kind of medium-sized expansions, the Khrag Pit Arena and Crawl. And these expansions are really interesting. They kind of run the gamut. They take up the entire spectrum of what an expansion can add. Some of these expansions just add cards to your base game. You will use them all the time. You'll see them all the time. A couple of the expansions add completely new ways to play with, even with their own little standalone mini games. And one of these expansions adds a kind of narrative game, a skirmish game, kind of like Battle of the Ancients into Dark Venture. It's really cool. It's really neat. So let's start by taking a look here at the upgrade kit. So this will bring your first edition into second edition. And what we get here we get some cards and our books. We get a cool little wooden token here for one of the big bads. We get a new setup and a reference card that you can use for quickly setting up your games. We get a small pack of replacement cards. And then we get all of our books that were replaced. And the core rulebook was greatly expanded. I want to grab my original core rulebook and just see how expanded it actually is. So the core rulebook was at 21 pages in first edition, and in second edition we are up to 35 pages. So at the end there is an FAQ. It's a much more, it's a better presented rulebook with more information and it covers some of the ambiguities from the original rulebook. So I think people diving into second edition will just have a much easier time understanding and grasping the game. So this is really nice. I also do want to mention that I do have a contribution credit in this game. So additional contributions by Daniel Davis. I think this is my first board game contribution credit here, but in first edition, I created some solo rules because there was an issue with the game played solo. This game relies on the players to populate the world with locations, with characters, with NPCs, and with enemies. And when you played solo, the world got populated too slowly. The game really dragged. So I added some solo rules to speed up the population of the world, of getting new locations out quicker, new NPCs, new enemies out quicker, and cycling through some of the cards quicker so you could get to the interesting stuff. Robert has he originally took my solo rules and made this really cool kind of a card that you could download on Board Game Geek. But he has taken these solo rules and kind of incorporated them into the main rules of second edition as well as the solo edition. So there are the solo version. So there are more ways now to help populate your world. And really, it's more ways to get to the good stuff. I think that was one of the main problems of Dark Venture is it took a little bit too long to get to the good part. But now it gets to the good part a lot quicker. And that good part is all the different locations and NPCs and characters and creatures and items and things that you can find while exploring this totally weird and bizarre world. So you'll get this expanded second edition rulebook. It's a much better piece of documentation for the game, and I really do like it. I read it through. And then you'll also get updated action and location guides. So as you are playing Dark Venture, you will be exploring all of these different locations. And as you explore the locations, you will turn to your guides. And there are two guides. So there are two kind of sets. Think of these as decks of cards. We have a deck of cards for your location a deck of actions, of encounters for your location A. And then we have B locations. We have a deck of location cards for your B cards and your B encounters. And so when you start a game, you will choose one set to work with and you'll put the other set away. And so these were just clarified, have a little more information and just better presented. So you'll get new books there to replace your old books. And then you will also get a second edition version of the Vile Invaders Guide. And I'm not sure how much this has changed. I didn't read too much here. Let's see, 22 pages in the first edition. And in the second edition, 24 pages. So a little expanded there as well. So overall, I think Robert did a really good job of updating the documentation to second edition and just making it easier to learn and easier to understand. So we do get a few cards. We don't get a lot of replacement cards, so there's not too much you have to do. But we'll get a new card for our Pale Horse, for our Falcon the Ageless. So these are followers. Our Arrow the Horse. We have new cards for Dane the Dirt Twin and Rain the Dirt Twin. Those of you who have played the original game, you know these two guys. Then we have Garhal the Warlord. We have a new Bitter Blood Tonic, a Warlock Talisman, a new card for our Rowboat. And then we have 5 replacement quests. So Save the Prince, Sinking Ancient Items, Second Wind, the Highwaymen, and the Gold Hand. And then we also get a new location card for the Crossroads. And the reason you get a new Crossroads card is just because you always play with this Crossroads card. It's always the first card and you set up when you are exploring the map. And so it has a different color back, so it is easier to identify. So you don't need to do a whole bunch of work upgrading your first edition to second edition. It's pretty easy. Just swap out your books, swap out your setup reference, and swap out, I don't know, about 24 different cards, and you are ready to go. Okay, let's take a look at the 2 small expansions. And these expansions are the most simple to incorporate. You will just take the stuff in these and mix it into your decks for your first or second edition. And so we have Beasts and Monsters, and we have the Alder King. So for those of you who played Battle of the Ancients, you will recognize the Alder King. And I just love how connected this world is and the lore. Robert, you should pay someone, or you should. I mean, you're a good writer. I would love to read short stories set in this world, man. That would be so cool. So this here is the Beasts and Monsters. So setting up Beasts and Monsters, add all item, location, character, and heroic quest cards from this expansion to the core game decks, then shuffle them. Set up the rest of the game as outlined in the core rulebook. Place the 2 location key cards from the expansions in place. So one of the issues with having your actions and your locations in a book is if there are ever expansions that need to add that, it's hard to add them to the book. So with the new locations in these expansions, you will get cards that you will reference when you play those locations. So you'll get some new standees and some chits here to keep track of all of your new enemies, NPCs, and heroes. Once again, just the art is off the charts good and weird and bold and unique. I love these standees so much, especially because they have a corresponding number on the back that you can match up to the number on the card. We get one new hero here. So we get Khrag the Arch Warlock, and he comes equipped with the Warlock Sword there. And so the Warlock Sword will add some add some attributes to Khrag there. He's a hero. He has some magical powers. We get 2 new followers. We get Deathkin, a follower, and we get to the Celestite Warden follower. Man, that guy looks so cool. I love him. And then we have some new enemies, some new NPCs here. We have Rezon Screamer, the Blued Craw, the Mutated Abomination, the Churling Slug, and the Crawleg. And then we have some new items here. We have the Oblivion Book. We have the Fire Death Elixir, the Torganier Egg, the Acid Egg, and an Acid Egg. And then here we have 2 new locations. So we have the Fetid Grounds, and we also have the Deadlands Bunker. And the little bee icon, that tells you that this is from the Beasts and Monsters expansion. So these are two new locations that you can explore, and you'll mix those into your map cards at the beginning of the game. So you might come across those 2 locations. When you do, you will take these cards, and these will have your encounters and your text, your flavor text for those 2 locations. So very, very handy, very easy to incorporate. And then we also have 2 new quests. We have the Hunter Becomes the Hunted and the Werebeast quest. So 2 new heroic quests to try to compete against, or to try to solve, and to try to get those victory points. So that was the Beasts and Monsters expansion. Next up, we have the small expansion here, and that is the Alder King. So same thing here, setting up the Alder King. It is exactly the same way. You just incorporate all of this stuff into your base game, 1st or 2nd edition. And these 2 expansions are very similar. So we have our tokens here. We have our Alder King there, and our other NPCs and monsters and heroes and followers. So this game is just really overflowing with interesting things, interesting creatures to discover. And so here we have our hero. We have Delok the Collector, and this is pretty interesting. So I think Delok from Battle of the Ancients, but I can't remember. I know I've heard Delok the Collector before, but once per game you can spend 1 action point, and if not in play, you find his Fabricator in hand or in the item deck, draw it, and drop it onto this location. If it is in play, move him unnoticed to it. You can fabricate an item on his turn, once per turn. When in the same location as the Fabricator, he can discard 1 item to draw 2 items from the item deck. Interesting. So he doesn't start with any items, but he can constantly kind of be swapping items in and out, looking for those really powerful items. That's an interesting hero. We have 2 new horses that you can gain, 2 new mounts that you can gain, and Princess Delphine here, a follower. And then we have the Alder King himself, one of the bigger bads in the game, and he comes equipped with the Alder Staff. So in this game, NPCs aren't just a single card. Monsters aren't just a single card. Sometimes you will have to build out an NPC or build out a monster like you would a hero. So some of the monsters, some of the NPCs, some of the things you will fight will come equipped with their own bespoke and custom weapons. So the Alder King, when he comes out onto the board, you will have to find the Alder Staff and equip the Alder Staff to the Alder King. Really cool. And then we have the King's Brute. And he has the Royal Mace. Man, that is a cool looking Royal Mace. I love that. He holds the Royal Mace or the Jaw Blade. Where's the Jaw Blade? There's the Jaw Blade. Robert Lemon's art, he's really good at adding light to his art. And here we have Delphine's crown and bracers. I wonder if she comes with that stuff. Let's see. Let's find Princess Delphine. Yes. So she wears Delphine's crown. So she will come equipped with the crown. Let me find that crown again. We can take a look at that or what that does. A dark enchantment while equipped to one of your characters when making any dice roll, you may re-roll one die. Nice, a nice way to mitigate some bad luck. There is Delok's Fabricator for Delok. And then the two new locations we get in this expansion are the Blood River and the Green Castle. And then we also have those two new location cards. And then we have two new heroic quests. We have Undercover Agent and the Dark Plague. So really cool. I am very happy with this expansion material. It adds a lot to the game. And speaking of adding a lot, let's take a look at the two kind of larger expansions now. So we have Crawl and the Khrag Pit Arena. Let's save... man, they're both so good. I don't know how to save the best to last. We'll do Crawl first. So Crawl here. New adventures. The Crawl expansion includes over 50 new cards, weapons, armor, characters, locations, and quests. Adds a new solo and two-player game mode to Dark Venture core game. A mysterious shadow has fallen across Dark Range. Explore the land, defeating enemies and gathering treasure. Disperse this ancient evil before you succumb to it. This expansion is really unique. So there really are three completely different ways to play this expansion. You can just add the stuff from this game to your standard decks and just play a normal game. So that's called integrating. So you can integrate all of these components to your decks and just play an expanded game. You can play a dedicated game that uses the stuff from this expansion and uses stuff from your base game in a completely new way. And that is called the Crawl game. So that's a whole new mode. This is kind of like the Moon Towers expansion in Pauper's Ladder, in that you will still use some of your base game stuff, but the game feels different. And it's a very different kind of game. Or you can use a full world exploration game where that game focuses on just exploring the different locations and having the location encounters. It's more of a narrative game. The Crawl game, you don't use any of the narrative location encounters. The Crawl game is focused on more of a traditional kind of dungeon crawl mode where the map is set out at the beginning of the game, and you will take these tokens, and these tokens will represent different things depending on which subset of cards you use. So at the beginning of the game, you will choose to use set 1 or set 2. You will take those tokens. Those tokens will correspond to different subdecks that you will build from everything that you own. So you will make these different decks of monsters, of items, of armor, and of weapons. And the items, you can go to a store in the game to buy items. You can buy your armor, you can buy your weapons, you can buy your items. And then these tokens here will correspond to different subdecks that you will create. And as you move from one location to the next, these will be face down. Then you will turn those over and you will have some kind of encounter, either with some treasure, some loot, an NPC, or a creature to fight. And in this mode, in quest mode, or I'm sorry, in crawl mode, you really are focused on combat and looting. It's a really neat way to get a completely different kind of game out of the same material that you will use. It's very smart. It's a very smart design. And in that game, you don't just have to fight. So the story of this expansion is this darkness has enchanted people. And so you need to go around and you need to disenchant people. You need to disenchant the NPCs. And as you disenchant your NPCs, you will gain different victory points. And the when you're playing in the competitive two-player mode, the player with the most victory points, the most quest points at the end of the game will win the game. So just a really a neat way to make a completely different style of game using the same components. And then you can also play the game, which is the full world exploration game. And the object of this solo and cooperative game mode is full exploration. It is intended for players who are most interested in experiencing all the location events and actions. So it's just really cool. In this one expansion, we have two polar opposite ways to play. You can play without the locations, without the actions, and just focus on combat and looting, or you can play entirely focused on those locations and location actions. Really neat. I'm very happy with this expansion. It's super cool. I was excited when Robert announced it, but I didn't really take a look at it more because I wanted to be surprised. And man, I am surprised, and it's super cool. So we have a couple new heroes here in this expansion, in the Crawl expansion. We have Larvok, the Skullbreaker, and he starts with Larvok's Warhammer. We have Thox the Elusive, and Thox the Elusive doesn't start with any weapons or anything, but his whole body's kind of a weapon. He has like acid blood and he can move around quicker. And then we have Countess Elvar, and she's a countess, so she draws 8 items at the beginning of the game, and then she can hold or wear any 5 of them. Super cool. Then we have Kedgen the Harvant, a follower. We have some new NPC enemies. We have a Thurgriffin, the Dark Lake Terror. We have Beardok the Brazen, and Beardok holds Last Breath or the Dirt Twins sword, whichever might be available. So there's Last Breath, there's his sword, kind of a hiltless katana there. We have Trilok the Thrasher, Mrygat, Raxot the Gatemaster. We have a Drekhearse, Kelvon Lurker, and then a few Kelvon Lurkers. And they might come with Cax Cleaver, and then we have the Kelvon Strangler, and the Kelvon Butcher and the Butcher. And then we have a Golden Spear, the Amulet of Orcus Chrono, the Halberd, the Scimitar of Tarbor. We have Gavket's Warblade, Clad's Scissors, the Rake's Head, Rake's Hand, the Dark Lantern, the Wand of Protection, the Wand of Oblivion, the Scroll of Flight, Regenerative Mushrooms. Man, a lot of really interesting items in this expansion. And then we also have 4 new locations. So we have the Dark Lake Cliff, the Oracle Outcrop, the Rod Outpost Light, and the Prod Outpost Light. Okay, and then those locations, the details are in your crawl book towards the back, and you will have new actions and new location encounters and new actions that you can take at those locations. And then we have a small deck of new side quests. You looking at me, get out of here, creep, on a roll, getting lucky with no luck, this seems wrong, into the crawl, on the move, if you aren't using it, I will, great gear, friend, thief, first to fight, and pay to win. And then we also have 4 new heroic quests: missing person, bandits, lost Orpal treasures, and the enemy of my enemy. So man, yeah, this thing is just absolutely overflowing with new stuff, with new things to explore, new things to encounter, and new ways to play your games of Dark Venture. So here we have our Darkness. These are our enchanted tokens. So when an enemy is enchanted, you will place one of these darkness tokens on them, and then you will remove it as a victory point when you disenchant them. You can also set up a campsite. So there is a way, this game comes with some baggies. There is a way, if you are playing in that big location exploration mode, that you can save your game and reset it almost like you do with something like Seventh Continent. So yeah, just out of the box, kind of an out of the box way to approach an expansion. And then here we have all of our new standees for the different creatures and our new chits for the different creatures that we can encounter. Man, look at that art. Just look at it. Oh, it's so grotesque. I love it. And to think that a lot of these creatures used to be somewhat human or more humanoid, and it was this kind of post-apocalyptic cataclysm that changed them into these new and weird and bizarre and monstrous creations. Oh, I love it. It's so cool. All right, so that was Crawl. And then the final expansion here is Khrag Pit Arena. And this incorporates some of the skirmish stuff from Battle of the Ancients into Dark Venture. So this says Arena Adventures. The Khrag Pit Arena expansion includes over 60 new cards. We have weapons, armor, characters, locations, and quests, and adds an arena map board to the Dark Venture core game. This expansion also includes a new standalone game, Battle to the Death. Sign your death waiver to enter the pit, earn prizes, and defeat vicious gladiators. Will you emerge from the Khrag Pit Arena victorious? Now, one thing this expansion has done is it has made me want Robert Lemon to take the awesome battle mats from Battle of the Ancients, because of those of you who have seen those battle mats in there that you play on, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say they are awesome. They look so cool. And take those and give us a encounter book so that we can play games of Dark Venture on those battle maps. Or maybe those battle maps in Battle of the Ancients could actually be kind of zoomed in encounter locations that we can encounter in our games of Dark Venture. And that would kind of allow us to use some of the stuff that we have in Battle of the Ancients as an expansion for Dark Ventures. And I think this kind of acts as maybe a bridge between those two games. And maybe it's pointing at a direction, maybe it's giving us a hint into the direction that these two games are going to go. I don't know. I'm just speculating, just kind of pie in the sky wishes here. But so we get our arena map. So here we have our little tactical skirmish map here where we will play on. And you can play a standalone game, either 2 players or solo, where you are going into this gladiatorial arena and just focusing on combat and working your way through combat. But there are also some interesting location encounters in this where you will have little choose your own adventures depending on what you do. And when you are fighting in the Khrag Pit Arena, the combat is a little more intense. It's a little more involved. We have this hit location chart. So every time you attack, you will roll 2d6 to determine which body part you are focusing on, which body part you are targeting on your opponent. And then there are new ways to engage in combat. So if we go back here, we have some optional Khrag Pit Arena rules. We have armor deflection rolls, mounted combat, death blows, and things like that. So this expansion here is really focused on the combat and ways to make the combat more interesting, and also ways to balance the game at the beginning of the game, because in a game of Dark Venture, each of the heroes are not really balanced. And that's cool. They're asymmetric. Some heroes are definitely more powerful than other heroes. Some heroes start with better gear than other heroes, and that's just the way it is, because these heroes have a legacy, they have a story, they have a background in this game, and when you are playing them, you are playing as that character, including that background. But if you want to balance the game a little more, you can use the starting gladiatorial equipment from the pit arena instead of the starting equipment of the heroes in your regular games of Dark Venture. Super cool. So this expansion here, again, it has 2 different ways to play. You can mix everything in to your games of Dark Venture, and then when you discover the Khrag Pit Arena location card, you can pull out the board and you can go into here and have a little more detailed combat encounter as a way to help win the game. However, you can also play it as a standalone little miniatures skirmish style game. And I think that is super cool. I love that so much. But here we have our tokens that we will get. So we have all of our new enemy encounters there. And then here we have our encounters. I believe these are the same encounter chits that were used in Battle of the Ancients. When you set up your map for the Khrag Pit, you'll take these encounter tokens and you will put those on certain coordinates like C2 or E4. And then as a character moves into that location, they will take that and then they will turn to that section in this book and they will read it. And then you will have different choices. And those choices might lead to other actions. So there is a little bit of a choose your own adventure in how you work through this book. And then the different actions might tell you to place these on other locations to where you'll then have to move back to them to continue that thread, to continue that narrative thread. Super cool. Again, very inventive. Both of these expansions are inventive. They are some of the most inventive expansions. However, there's a little bit of a downside to that in that each one of these expansions, the Khrag Pit Arena and Crawl, does add some fiddliness. They both add quite a bit of new rules that you will have to read. Crawl, when you set it up, there is quite a bit of setup because you have to make 3 or 4 different sub decks. So you won't just be pulling out Crawl and very quickly playing it. They Each of them adds a little bit of a barrier to get into. The easiest way would be to just incorporate the stuff and maybe just kind of ignore some of the new things that have new rules, but then you aren't getting the full experience. So just know that each of the expansions, Crawl and Khrag Pit, you will need to put a little more effort in to get the most out of. But they are inventive, unique, and just they take chances. And it's kind of rare that we see expansions like this that really do take chances that change up the way that the game is actually played. And so we have a couple new heroes here. We have Irvon the Shifty, and he holds the Gladius and the Crescent Shield there. And then we have Keldon Pyre's Head. And this guy is really interesting. So, Phantom Gear, when entering combat. So, Keldon doesn't start with any gear, but every time he enters combat, he draws 6 items from the item deck, and then he wears or holds them. And after combat, all items he wears or holds are shuffled back. So he has this weird kind of temporal ability to conjure items that he can have when he enters combat. Super interesting. Here we have the Terra Fiend Bilson, that's a follower. We have the Girth Herder here, and he starts with the Girth Herder's Pike. We have Roghek the Brutal, and Roghek has the Chain Mace. We have Feldane the Ruthless, and they start with Feldane's Sword Axe. Man, look at that thing. We have Urgon the Cruel, a Gladiator Net, and a small trident. And then we have some beasts here. We have Abhorstis. We have Aurelion the River Beast, the Trained Equidon, another Trained Equidon, the Haglost Fiend, and the Vorpin Behemoth. We get to our items here. We have our chest plates, our Galworm Wraps, our Crystal Gauntlets, our Katars, the Gladiator Nets, the Enchanted Bandages, the Gladiator Helm, Gladius, Rondel Stiletto, the Haverlane's Claw, the Large Trident, the Leather Bracers, the Belt of Khrag, and then here we have our Heroic Swords and Heroic Bucklers. So these are the items. These are just very, very bog standard, typical shield and sword that you can use to help balance these starting heroes. So these are the items that you can give to your characters at the beginning of the game instead of their bespoke custom items. We have some Blum Mead, and also the heroes, when you start a game, they can also start with a heroic relic. This is a new thing that the heroes can start with, which kind of makes the game, turns it into a little bit more of an easy mode. And we have 3 new locations. So we do have our location card for the Khrag Pit Arena. So you can just mix this into your location deck. And when you find this, you can take this out and have your more detailed encounter. And again, man, just imagine if if the battle mats in Battle of the Ancients had a location card. You found that location card, and then you went to a detailed, zoomed-in map in those battle mats from Battle of the Ancients and had some kind of little narrative skirmish game on those. Oh, man, that sounds so cool. Sounds very complex, but man, I think that could work. And then we have our Pocket Dimension card, and here we have the Khrag Pit Pool. And so this isn't its own location. This is a way that this location here can be changed. And you will find all of your details for these new locations in your Khrag Pit Arena book. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. For those of you, oh wait, did we take a look at the Heroic Quest? I don't think we did. Faction Unity, Saving a Friend, the Age Day Tourney, and the Life Stealer. So 4 new, what do we have? I almost forgot these. And a small deck of side quests. So Into the Pit, Are You Not Entertained, Agent of Change, Bare Knuckle Brawler, Taking Care of Business, Weapons Master, That's Not Fair, Take Action, Let's Try Something Different, This Is Durable, This Wasn't in My Job Description, and Chain Reaction. So yeah, fans of Dark Venture got a heck of a lot of cool stuff for this game. Man, yeah, I'm super excited. I can't wait to play this more now. And just, I really want to dive into that crawl mode, that standalone crawl mode, and also experience that kind of story based location encounter mode. Sounds interesting, but all of these are super, super cool. And I think Robert really just kind of knocked it out of the park with these expansions. And it gets me really excited to see what's next, to see how Battle of the Ancients and how Dark Venture, how they might even converge even a little bit more to become kind of maybe a one super game. And how cool would that be? So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this detailed look at all of the new stuff you get with the Dark Venture expansions. We will talk to you later. Bye bye.